Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm here with another deep dive into the wild world of Reddit drama. And today, we're exploring some absolutely unhinged stories from the Am I the subreddit. This video was suggested by this comment. If you have any suggestions or know any subreddits, feel free to let me know in the comments section below, as I pretty much see every single comment that comes in. Quick bit of news. I just added channel memberships. It's just 2 tiers for now, so if you enjoy the content and want to support it a little more, feel free to check it out. Totally optional, but always appreciated. Anyways, I've got a collection of stories today, so grab whatever you're working on, get comfortable, and let's dive into some stories that'll make you grateful for your own relatively normal problems. Let's start with this first one that honestly had my jaw on the floor. I'm 26 years old and I thought I had my life figured out. Good job, nice apartment, solid group of friends, the kind of stability that takes years to build. My younger sister Emma is 23 and we've always had this weird dynamic where I'm the responsible one and she's the free spirit who somehow always lands on her feet. About 8 months ago, Emma started dating this guy Mike who works in finance. Seemed decent enough when I met him. Polite, well-dressed, the type of guy who brings flowers on the first date. Emma was head over heels from day one, constantly gushing about how he was different from her usual type, how mature and stable he was. Now here's where things get complicated. I work in marketing for a mid-sized tech company, and about 4 months into Emma's relationship with Mike, we hired a new client liaison. You can probably see where this is going. The new hire was Mike, same Mike who was supposedly so in love with my sister that he was already talking about moving in together. At first I figured it was just an awkward coincidence. I kept things professional, didn't mention Emma, and assumed he'd do the same. But Mike had other plans. Within 2 weeks of starting, he was finding excuses to stop by my desk, suggesting we grab coffee to discuss projects that honestly didn't require face-to-face meetings. I'm not stupid. I could tell he was interested, but I kept deflecting. Short responses, busy schedule, always bringing up how great it was that Emma had found someone so wonderful. I thought I was being clear without causing drama. Then came the company holiday party in December. Open bar, fancy venue, everyone letting loose after a stressful quarter. I was talking to some colleagues near the bar when Mike appeared next to me, clearly having had a few drinks. He starts going on about how beautiful I look, how he's been thinking about me, how he made a mistake getting serious with Emma so quickly. I told him he was drunk and needed to go home to his girlfriend. My sister. You know, the person who's been planning their future together for months. That's when he dropped the bomb. He said Emma was sweet but immature, that what he really wanted was someone with their life together, someone like me. Then he leaned in and tried to kiss me. I pushed him away hard enough that he stumbled backward into a cocktail table. Made quite the scene. Half the party turned to stare, drinks went flying, and Mike ended up with cranberry juice all down his white shirt. I grabbed my coat and left without saying goodbye to anyone. The next morning, Emma called me crying. Mike had come home drunk, reeking of alcohol and cranberry juice, and apparently decided the best course of action was to confess everything. But his version of everything was that I had been flirting with him for months, that I came onto him at the party, and that he rejected me. Emma was devastated, not just because her boyfriend had supposedly been pursued by her own sister, but because she felt like I had betrayed her trust. She wouldn't listen when I tried to explain what actually happened. In her mind, why would Mike lie about something like that? Word spread through our family fast. My mum called demanding to know what I was thinking, trying to steal Emma's boyfriend. My dad sent me a text saying he was disappointed in my behaviour. Even my grandmother, who usually stays out of family drama, left me a voicemail about how sisters should stick together. Meanwhile, at work, Mike was spinning his own narrative, telling people I had been inappropriate with him, that he was considering filing a complaint with HR. The whole office dynamic shifted overnight. Colleagues who used to chat with me at lunch started keeping their distance. My boss pulled me aside and suggested I might want to consider requesting a transfer to a different department. I felt completely trapped. My family thought I was a backstabbing sister. My co-workers thought I was unprofessional. And Mike was walking around playing the victim while still dating Emma like nothing had happened. That's when I decided I needed proof. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of the work messages where Mike suggested unnecessary meetings, email timestamps showing how often he initiated contact. I even reached out to a colleague who had been standing near us during the holiday party incident and asked if they remembered what they saw. But I needed something more concrete, something that would show Emma exactly who she was dating. So I did something that probably makes me a terrible person. I created a fake dating profile, used photos that were clearly me, but from angles where I looked different enough that Mike might not immediately recognize me if he came across the profile. Listed interests that I knew would appeal to him based on months of watching him try to impress me. It took exactly 3 days for him to match with me and send a message. The messages started innocent enough. Basic getting to know you questions, compliments about my photos. But within a week, he was suggesting we meet up for drinks. When I said I was looking for something serious, not just casual dating, he assured me he was single and ready for a real relationship. Single. While he was literally living with my sister and talking about proposing, I kept the conversation going for 2 more weeks, building up enough evidence to show that Mike was actively pursuing other women while in a committed relationship with Emma. The messages got increasingly inappropriate. He sent photos of himself that were clearly taken in Emma's bathroom. He talked about how he was tired of dating someone who wasn't on his level professionally. The worst part was when he started comparing his current girlfriend to me, not knowing he was actually talking to me. He said Emma was too clingy, too emotional, that he needed someone more mature and independent, someone who understood ambition. I screenshot everything. Then I had to figure out how to tell Emma without revealing that I had catfished her boyfriend. I couldn't just show up with a fake dating profile and expect her to believe me. She already thought I was trying to sabotage her relationship. So I did something even more morally questionable. I told Emma I had seen Mike on a dating app while I was swiping through profiles myself. I said I wasn't sure if it was really him, but it looked like his photos, and the profile said he was single. Emma demanded to see the profile. I showed her the screenshots on my phone, conveniently leaving out the part where I was the one he had been messaging. She went quiet for a long time, just staring at the photos of her boyfriend, advertising himself as available. Then she asked if I could help her figure out if he was actually talking to other women. That's when I showed her the conversation screenshots, told her a friend of mine had matched with him and sent me the messages because she recognized him from Emma's social media posts. Emma read through every single message, the lies about being single, the complaints about his current girlfriend, the suggestions for meeting up. Her face went through every emotion: shock, hurt, anger, disgust. She confronted Mike that night. I wasn't there, but according to Emma, he tried to deny it at first, then claimed it was just harmless flirting, then finally admitted he had been feeling trapped in their relationship and was looking for a way out. Emma kicked him out immediately, changed the locks, blocked his number, told him never to contact her again, but here's where it gets complicated. The next week at work, Mike cornered me in the break room. He was furious, accusing me of sabotaging his relationship, saying he knew I had something to do with Emma finding out about the dating profile. I played dumb, told him I had no idea what he was talking about, that maybe he should have thought about the consequences before cheating on his girlfriend. That's when he threatened me, said if I didn't stay out of his business, he would make sure everyone at the company knew exactly what kind of person I was. That he would destroy my reputation the same way I had destroyed his relationship. I looked him straight in the eye and told him to do his worst. That unlike him, I hadn't actually done anything wrong. The next day, Mike submitted his resignation. No explanation, no 2 weeks' notice, just packed up his desk and left. Emma and I are slowly rebuilding our relationship. She apologized for not believing me about the holiday party incident, and I apologized for for not handling the situation better from the beginning. We're getting there, but I still haven't told her about the fake dating profile. Part of me thinks she deserves to know the whole truth, and part of me thinks it would just hurt her more to know how elaborate my deception was, even if it was meant to protect her. My family has mostly come around, though there's still some awkwardness at gatherings. My mum keeps making comments about how family should communicate better, clearly aimed at me. At work, things have settled down, but I can tell some people still wonder what really happened between Mike and me. The official story is that he left for a better opportunity, but office gossip has a way of filling in the blanks. So here I am, wondering if I'm the arsehole for catfishing my sister's boyfriend to prove he was cheating on her. I exposed him for what he was, but I lied and manipulated the situation to do it. Emma is better off without him, but she still doesn't know the full extent of what I did to get rid of him. Part of me feels justified because Mike was the one who chose to cheat, who chose to lie, who chose to try to manipulate both Emma and me. All I did was give him the opportunity to show his true colours. But another part of me knows that creating a fake profile crosses a line, that lying to Emma about how I got the evidence makes me almost as bad as Mike. I keep telling myself that the ends justify the means, that protecting my sister from a cheating boyfriend was worth the deception. But late at night, when I'm lying in bed replaying everything that happened, I wonder if I became the villain in my own story. The worst part is that I'd probably do it again. If I saw Emma heading toward another Mike, another guy who was going to break her heart and turn our family against each other, I think I'd use whatever tools I had to protect her. Does that make me a good sister or a manipulative person who can't mind her own business? All right, that story is done, and honestly, I don't even know where to start. On one hand, Mike was clearly a manipulative cheater who got exactly what he deserved. But creating a fake dating profile to catch him, that's some next-level detective work that crosses into morally grey territory. The sister was damned if she did, damned if she didn't. Her family already thought she was the villain, so maybe fighting fire with fire was the only option left. Still, the fact that she's keeping the catfishing secret from Emma feels like it could blow up later. Let's move on to our next story, because apparently family drama doesn't end there. I'm 31 years old, and I thought I had a good relationship with my parents. Sure, they could be a little controlling sometimes, but they helped me through college, supported me when I was getting my business off the ground, and we talked on the phone at least twice a week. I figured that's what close families do. My wife Sarah and I have been married for 3 years, and we'd been trying to have kids for about 18 months when we finally got pregnant last spring. We were over the moon. Sarah had been tracking everything, taking vitamins, doing all the research, and when that test finally showed 2 lines, we both cried happy tears in our bathroom at 6 in the morning. We waited until the 12-week mark to start telling people. Called my parents first, then Sarah's family, then close friends. Everyone was thrilled. My mum immediately started planning, talking about converting their spare room into a nursery for when we visited, buying baby clothes, the whole grandparent fantasy. Everything seemed perfect until Sarah's anatomy scan at 20 weeks. The ultrasound tech got quiet during the appointment, spent a long time looking at the screen, then excused herself to get the doctor. When the doctor came in, she explained that our baby had several markers for Down syndrome. She recommended we do an amniocentesis to confirm, but based on what she was seeing, she was fairly certain. Sarah and I sat in that sterile room holding hands while the doctor explained what this might mean. The potential health complications, the developmental delays, the reality that our child would need extra support throughout their life. She was careful not to influence our decision either way, just presented the facts and told us to take our time processing everything. We spent the next week researching, talking to specialists, reaching out to families who had children with Down syndrome. It was overwhelming and scary, but the more we learned, the more we realised this didn't change how much we wanted our baby. Yes, it would be challenging. Yes, our lives would look different than we'd imagined. But this was our child, and we were going to love them no matter what. The amniocentesis confirmed the diagnosis. Our daughter, we found out it was a girl, had Down syndrome. We decided to tell our families together, starting with my parents, since they'd been the most excited about becoming grandparents. I called and asked if we could come over that evening to talk about the baby. My mum had dinner waiting when we arrived. She'd made Sarah's favourite lasagna and bought sparkling grape juice to celebrate. She kept talking about how she'd started crocheting baby blankets and how my dad was already looking at cribs online. We sat them down in the living room after dinner. I explained about the ultrasound, the additional testing, and the diagnosis. I tried to stay positive, mentioning all the research we'd done about children with Down syndrome, living full, happy lives. The room went completely silent. My dad was the first to speak. He asked if we were sure, if we'd gotten a second opinion, if the doctors could be wrong. When I confirmed that yes, we were certain, he leaned back in his chair and let out this long sigh. Then my mum asked the question that changed everything. So what are you going to do about it? I didn't understand what she meant at first. I said we were going to prepare, maybe take some classes, connect with support groups, start researching early intervention programs. My mum shook her head. No, I mean, what are you going to do about the pregnancy? The implication hit me like a punch to the gut. Sarah's hand tightened around mine. I told my mum that we were going to continue the pregnancy, that we wanted this baby, regardless of the diagnosis. That's when things got ugly. My dad started talking about quality of life, about the burden we'd be placing on ourselves and our marriage. My mum brought up the financial costs, the strain on our relationship, how this would affect any future children we might have. They used words like difficult and realistic and responsible decision. They never said the word abortion directly, but they didn't have to. Their message was crystal clear. Sarah started crying. These were supposed to be our baby's grandparents, the people who would love and support our child unconditionally. Instead, they were suggesting we terminate the pregnancy because our daughter wouldn't be normal. I told them we'd made our decision, and we hoped they would support us. My mum said of course they'd support us, but they wanted us to really think about what we were choosing. The conversation ended awkwardly. We left earlier than planned, and the drive home was mostly silent, except for Sarah's occasional sniffles. Over the next few weeks, my parents kept bringing it up. Phone calls where my mum would mention articles she'd read about the challenges of raising special needs children. My dad would send me links to financial planning websites, highlighting the costs of lifelong care. They framed it as concern, as wanting us to be prepared. But it felt like they were trying to wear us down, to convince us to change our minds while we still could. The breaking point came at 28 weeks. We were having a family barbecue at my parents' house. Sarah was showing now, clearly pregnant, and she'd been excited to see everyone and talk about baby plans. My aunt was there with her kids, and she was gushing over Sarah's bump, asking about nursery themes and baby names. Sarah was glowing, talking about how we'd decided on Emma for our daughter's name. That's when my mum pulled my aunt aside. I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but I caught enough. Words like complications and difficult situation, and not what we expected. When my aunt came back over, the energy had completely shifted. She was still polite to Sarah, but the excitement was gone. Instead of asking about the baby, she started talking about the weather. I confronted my mum in the kitchen, asked her point blank what she'd said to my aunt. She got defensive, said she was just explaining the situation so people would know to be sensitive, that it wasn't fair to let everyone get excited about a baby that might not survive or might have serious health problems. I lost it, told her that Emma was going to be fine, that children with Down syndrome weren't tragedies, that her granddaughter deserved better than shame, and whispered conversations. My mum started crying, saying she was just trying to protect everyone from disappointment, that she loved us and wanted what was best for our family. I told her that what was best for our family was support, not sabotage. We left the barbecue early. Again, Sarah was quiet on the drive home, then finally said what we'd both been thinking. They're ashamed of her. They're ashamed of Emma. And she's not even born yet. Mikhail. That night, I made one of the hardest decisions of my life. I called my parents and told them that until they could accept and love Emma exactly as she was, they wouldn't be part of her life. My mum was devastated, said I was being cruel, that they were just trying to help, that they'd come around once the baby was born. I told her it was too late for that Sarah and I needed to protect our daughter from people who saw her as a burden or a mistake, even if those people were her grandparents. Emma was born healthy at 39 weeks. She's beautiful and perfect, and yes, she has Down syndrome. She's meeting her milestones. She smiles when she sees us, and she's brought more joy into our lives than I ever imagined possible. My parents have sent cards and gifts. They call occasionally, asking if they can visit, promising they'll be different now. My mum sent a long letter apologising, saying she was scared and didn't know how to handle the news, that she loves Emma and wants to be part of her life. But I can't forget those months of pressure and disappointment. I can't forget my mum pulling my aunt aside to whisper about our difficult situation. I can't forget the implication that our daughter would be better off not existing. Sarah thinks I'm being too harsh, that people can change and learn. She wants Emma to know her grandparents, even if they needed time to adjust their expectations. Part of me agrees. Part of me thinks I'm depriving Emma of relationships that could become meaningful. But another part of me remembers sitting in that living room, holding my pregnant wife's hand, while my parents essentially told us our baby wasn't worth keeping. I don't know if I'm protecting Emma or punishing my parents. I don't know if I'm being a good father or a stubborn son. All I know is that my daughter deserves to be loved unconditionally from day one, not tolerated after people get used to the idea of her. So there's that story, and honestly, my heart breaks for this family. The parents' reaction was absolutely awful. Treating their granddaughter like a burden before she was even born is unforgivable. But the complexity of family relationships means it's not black and white. Can people change and grow? Maybe. But should Emma's parents risk exposing her to that kind of conditional love? That's the impossible choice they're facing. Our next story takes us into completely different territory, but the family drama is just as intense. I'm 24 years old and I've been planning my wedding for 8 months. My fiancé David and I are getting married next month, and everything has been going smoothly until this past weekend when my future mother-in-law decided to lose her absolute mind. Linda has always been a little extra. She's one of those women who has opinions about everything and isn't shy about sharing them. But she raised David to be an amazing man, and she's always been kind to me. So I figured her occasional boundary crossing was just part of accepting her son's choice in partner. The wedding planning process has been mostly collaborative. Linda offered to pay for the flowers, which was incredibly generous, and she's been involved in choosing the arrangements. We've had a few minor disagreements about colours and styles, but nothing major. Last month, Linda asked if she could see my wedding dress. I explained that it was being altered and wouldn't be ready for another few weeks, but I showed her pictures from when I tried it on at the boutique. It's a classic A-line dress, ivory satin with delicate lace sleeves and a chapel train. Nothing too revealing, nothing inappropriate, just elegant and timeless. I felt like a princess when I tried it on, and David nearly cried when he saw the photos. Linda looked at the pictures for a long time, then asked if I was sure this was the dress I wanted. I said yes, I loved it, and David loved it too. She nodded and said it was beautiful, that I'd look lovely. I thought that was the end of it. Fast forward to this past Saturday. I was at my final dress fitting, making sure everything was perfect for the wedding. The seamstress had done an amazing job with the alterations, and the dress fit like it was made for me. I was standing on the platform, in front of the three-way mirror, admiring how the lace caught the light. When Linda walked into the boutique, I was surprised to see her, since we hadn't planned to meet up. She said she was in the area and wanted to see how the alterations turned out. The boutique staff brought out a chair for her, and she sat down, while I showed off the final result. I did a little spin, pointed out how perfectly the sleeves fit now, how the hem was exactly the right length with my shoes. Linda was quiet for a minute, then asked if we could have some privacy to talk. The seamstress and boutique manager stepped away, and Linda stood up from her chair. She walked around me slowly, like she was inspecting the dress from every angle. Then she said the words that are still echoing in my head. "You know, I wore white to my wedding too. Back then, it meant something." I didn't understand what she was getting at first. I asked her what she meant. Linda looked me straight in the eye and said, "White is for virgins, dear. Maybe you should consider ivory or champagne instead." The room went dead silent. I could feel my face burning with embarrassment and anger. I told Linda that my dress was ivory, not white, and that even if it was white, the colour of my wedding dress was none of her business. She shook her head and said she was just trying to help me avoid any awkwardness, that some of the older guests might have opinions about my choice to wear white when David and I had been living together for 2 years. I was so shocked that I couldn't even form words. This woman was standing in a bridal boutique in front of strangers, questioning my right to wear the dress I'd chosen based on my sexual history. Linda kept going. She said she wasn't judging me, that times had changed, but that I should think about what message I was sending, that maybe a nice blush or sage green would be more appropriate for someone in my situation. That's when I found my voice. I told Linda that my dress was perfect, that I wasn't changing anything, and that her opinion about my personal life was completely inappropriate. She got defensive, said she was just looking out for the family's reputation, that she didn't want people talking or making assumptions. I asked her exactly what people would be assuming and what that had to do with her. Linda's face got red. She said that as David's mother, she had a right to be concerned about how the wedding would be perceived, that she'd invited friends and family members who had traditional values. I told her that anyone who had a problem with my dress could stay home. The boutique manager must have heard our voices getting louder because she came back over and asked if everything was okay. Linda immediately switched to her sweet grandmother voice and said everything was fine, that we were just discussing some minor details. But I was done pretending. I told the boutique manager that my future mother-in-law was suggesting I change my dress colour because she didn't think I had the right to wear ivory. The manager's eyes went wide. She looked between Linda and me, clearly uncomfortable with being in the middle of family drama. Linda tried to backtrack, saying there had been a misunderstanding, that she just wanted me to be happy with my choice. I said I was perfectly happy with my choice, and that I'd be even happier if she kept her opinions about my worthiness to wear certain colours to herself. Linda left the boutique without saying goodbye. I stayed for another hour, double-checking every detail of the dress with the seamstress, but the whole experience was ruined. Instead of feeling excited about my final fitting, I felt judged and humiliated. When I got home, David could tell something was wrong. I told him what happened, and he was furious. He called his mother immediately and told her she owed me an apology. According to David, Linda said she'd been misunderstood, that she never meant to imply anything inappropriate, that she was just trying to help me make the best choice for our special day. David wasn't buying it. He told her that questioning my right to wear ivory was completely out of line, and that she needed to apologise and promise it wouldn't happen again. Linda apparently started crying, saying she felt like she was being attacked for caring about the wedding, that she'd only been trying to help, and now everyone was mad at her. David stood his ground. He said her help wasn't needed when it came to my dress, and that she needed to respect my choices. The next day, Linda sent me a text message apologising for any misunderstanding. She said she thought my dress was beautiful and that she was looking forward to seeing me wear it on our special day. But the apology felt hollow. She said she was sorry for the misunderstanding, not for what she actually did. She didn't acknowledge that questioning my right to wear ivory was inappropriate, just that I'd misunderstood her intentions. I showed the text to David, and he agreed that it wasn't really an apology. He called her again and asked her to clarify exactly what she was apologising for. That's when Linda finally admitted that she shouldn't have commented on my dress choice, and that my personal life was none of her business. But then she added that she hoped I understood. She was just trying to protect me from judgment. It's like she can't help herself. Even when she's apologizing, she's still implying that there's something to judge me for. The wedding is in 3 weeks. Linda is still planning to attend, and she's still paying for the flowers. But the relationship feels different now. I can't shake the feeling that she sees me as not quite good enough for her son, not quite worthy of the traditional white dress and fairy tale wedding. David is caught in the middle. He's furious with his mother, but she's still his mother. He wants to protect me, but he also doesn't want to destroy his relationship with Linda over one terrible conversation. I keep going back and forth between wanting to uninvite her and wanting to prove her wrong by looking absolutely stunning in my ivory dress. Part of me wishes I'd just told her to mind her own business and walked away. But another part of me is glad this happened now, so I know exactly what kind of person I'm dealing with for the rest of my marriage. I'm wearing my ivory dress, and I'm going to look beautiful in it. But I'll never forget that my future mother-in-law thought I didn't deserve to. Wow, just wow. Linda really thought she could police someone else's wedding dress based on outdated and frankly disgusting ideas about purity and worthiness. The audacity of standing in a bridal boutique and telling someone they don't deserve to wear ivory is breathtaking. At least David stood up for his fiancée, but this is definitely going to create lasting tension in that family. Some people really need to learn that their opinions about other people's personal lives should stay in their own heads. Now let's dive into our final story of the day. If you're still here listening to these wild family sagas, hit that subscribe button, because trust me, there's always more drama where this came from. And I love having you along for the ride through the chaos of human relationships. I'm 29 years old, and I've been married to my husband Jake for 5 years. We have what I thought was a solid relationship built on trust, communication, and shared goals. Jake works in construction management. I'm a nurse at the local hospital, and we've been saving up to buy our first house together. About 6 months ago, Jake started acting differently, not in an obvious way that would immediately raise red flags, but in small ways that accumulated over time. He'd come home from work later than usual, claiming he had to finish paperwork or deal with supplier issues. He'd take phone calls in the garage or outside, saying it was work-related drama he didn't want to burden me with. I trusted him completely, so I didn't think much of it. Jake had always been dedicated to his job, and construction projects can be unpredictable. Plus, he was still affectionate with me, still made time for our weekend date nights, still talked about our future plans. The first real sign something was wrong came when I noticed our joint savings account balance was lower than expected. We'd been putting away $800 a month for our house down payment, and when I checked the account in March, we were short about $3,000. When I asked Jake about it, he said there had been some unexpected expenses with his truck. Plus he'd had to front some money for work supplies that would be reimbursed later. He seemed annoyed that I was questioning him about it, which was unusual since we normally discussed all major expenses together. I let it slide because Jake had never lied to me about money before. But I started paying closer attention to our finances. Over the next 2 months, more money went missing. Small amounts at first, then larger withdrawals that Jake explained away with increasingly elaborate stories. Equipment rentals, emergency repairs, advances he'd given to crew members who were struggling financially. By May, we were missing almost $8,000 from our house fund. That's when I decided to do some investigating. I started by calling Jake's company to ask about the reimbursements he'd mentioned. The office manager was confused, said there hadn't been any employee advances or equipment rentals that would require Jake to pay out of pocket. I felt sick. Jake was lying to me about where our money was going, and I had no idea why. I considered confronting him directly, but something held me back. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe it was the memory of how defensive he'd gotten when I asked about the first missing money. I decided I needed more information before having that conversation. So I did something I never thought I'd do in my marriage. I started keeping track of Jake's schedule without telling him. I noted when he said he'd be working late, when he claimed to have weekend projects, when he took those mysterious phone calls. Then I started spot-checking his stories. I'd drive by his job sites during lunch breaks, or call his office to ask if he was available. More often than not, Jake wasn't where he said he'd be. The pattern became clear pretty quickly. Jake was disappearing for hours at a time, multiple times a week, and lying about where he was going. I was terrified he was having an affair. The missing money, the secret phone calls, the unexplained absences, it all pointed to him spending our savings on another woman. But when I finally worked up the courage to follow him one evening, the truth was somehow worse than I'd imagined. Jake drove to a strip mall about 20 minutes from our house and parked outside a small storefront with tinted windows. The sign said Lucky 7 Gaming, and there were neon lights in the windows advertising poker and slot machines. I sat in my car and watched my husband walk into an underground casino. He stayed for 4 hours. When he came out, his shoulders were slumped and he looked defeated. I followed him home at a distance, my mind racing with questions and anger and disbelief. Jake had been gambling away our house down payment, our future, our financial security, and he'd been lying to my face about it for months. When I confronted him that night, he broke down completely. Through tears, he admitted that he'd started going to the casino a few months earlier when a co-worker invited him to check it out. He said it was just supposed to be a one-time thing, something fun to blow off steam after stressful days at work. But he'd won $300 on his first visit, and that rush of easy money hooked him immediately. Jake told me he'd convinced himself he could win back more than he was spending, that he'd be able to replace the money he'd taken from our savings and maybe even add to it. He said every time he lost, he'd think one more session would turn things around. He was in deep, not just the $8,000 from our joint account, but he'd maxed out 2 credit cards I didn't know about and borrowed money from his brother. All told, he was about $15,000 in debt. I was devastated. Not just because of the money though, that was crushing enough, but because Jake had looked me in the eye for months and lied. He'd let me believe we were building toward our shared goals, while he was systematically destroying our financial future. Jake begged for forgiveness. He promised he'd stop gambling, that he'd get help, that he'd do whatever it took to earn back my trust. He said he'd been afraid to tell me because he knew how disappointed I'd be, and he kept thinking he could fix it before I found out. I told him I needed time to think. I spent that night at my sister's house, trying to process everything. The next morning, Jake had already researched Gamblers Anonymous meetings and made an appointment with a financial counselor. He'd also called his brother to confess about the loan and ask for help creating a repayment plan. He seemed genuinely remorseful and committed to making changes, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was only sorry because he'd been caught. I agreed to try working through it, but with conditions. Jake had to attend GA meetings twice a week. We had to go to couples counselling, and I was taking over all our finances until he could prove he was trustworthy again. For the first month, things seemed to be improving. Jake was going to his meetings, participating actively in therapy, and being completely transparent about his whereabouts. He'd text me photos of where he was during his lunch breaks, call me when he left work, he even let me track his location on his phone. But then I found out he'd been lying about the extent of his gambling problem. I was organising our paperwork for the financial counsellor when I discovered bank statements for an account I didn't know existed. Jake had opened a separate checking account 6 months earlier and had been funneling money into it from his paychecks. That account showed gambling losses totaling over $30,000. $30,000. Money that should have been going toward our mortgage, our groceries, our shared life. Money he'd hidden from me while I was working extra shifts at the hospital to boost our savings. When I confronted Jake with the statements, he initially tried to deny they were his. Then he claimed the account was old and he'd forgotten about it. Finally, he admitted the truth. He'd been hiding the full scope of his addiction because he didn't want to lose me. That's when I realized Jake wasn't just a gambling addict. He was a pathological liar who would say anything to avoid consequences. I told him I was done, that I couldn't build a life with someone who had spent months deceiving me about something so fundamental to our relationship. Jake fell apart. He said he'd do anything to save our marriage, that he'd never gamble again, that he'd spend the rest of his life making it up to me. But I was already mentally checked out. The man I'd married wouldn't have stolen from our joint account. The man I'd married wouldn't have looked me in the eye and lied for months. The man I'd married wouldn't have prioritized his addiction over our future together. I filed for divorce 2 weeks later. Jake has been trying to convince me to reconsider ever since. He's still going to GA meetings, he's gotten a second job to start paying back the debt, and he's sent me countless texts apologizing and promising to change. But trust, once broken this completely, doesn't just magically repair itself. Even if Jake never gambles again, how will I ever believe him when he says he's working late? How will I ever feel secure in our financial decisions? How will I ever stop wondering what else he might be hiding from me? Some of our mutual friends think I'm being too harsh. They say addiction is a disease, that Jake deserves a chance to make amends, that our marriage vows included for better or worse. My family, on the other hand, thinks I should have left him the moment I found out about the gambling. I'm somewhere in the middle, wondering if I'm giving up too easily on someone I loved for 5 years, or if I'm finally standing up for myself after months of being manipulated and deceived. The divorce will be finalized next month. Jake will keep his debt, and I'll keep what's left of my sanity. I still love the man I thought I married, but that man never existed. The real Jake is someone who could lie to my face while stealing our future, and I can't spend the rest of my life waiting for him to become someone trustworthy. So that's where that story ends, and honestly, I don't blame her one bit. $30,000 in hidden gambling debt. That's not a mistake or a momentary lapse in judgment. That's a sustained pattern of deception that destroys the very foundation of a marriage. You can't build a life with someone when you can't trust them with basic honesty about money. The friends saying she's being too harsh clearly don't understand that addiction doesn't excuse betrayal, and some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. That wraps up today's dive into the messy, complicated world of family drama and relationship disasters. If you made it this far through all these wild stories, you're definitely my kind of person, and I'd love to have you stick around for more of these deep dives into human chaos. Hit that subscribe button if these stories kept you engaged, because trust me, the internet never runs out of people making questionable life choices, and I'll be here to share them with you. Looking back, I still can't believe how quickly everything unraveled, and it all started with something as simple as a family group chat. I'm 27 and I've always been the peacekeeper in my family. My parents divorced when I was 12, and I somehow became the messenger between them, the one who made sure holidays worked out, the one who smoothed over the awkward moments at graduations and birthdays. It was exhausting, but it was my role. My mum remarried when I was in college to a guy named Frank, who seemed decent enough. He was quiet, worked in accounting, treated my mum well. My dad stayed single, but dated occasionally. The arrangement worked because everyone stayed in their lanes. Last year, my mum suggested we start a family group chat to make coordinating easier. Just the 4 of us, me, my mum, my dad, and Frank. It seemed harmless enough. We'd use it for birthday reminders, holiday plans, sharing photos of my nephew when my sister visited. Everything was fine for months, normal family stuff. Dad would send pictures of his garden, Mum would share recipes, Frank would occasionally chime in with weather updates or local news articles. I was actually happy we'd found a way to stay connected without the awkward phone tag. Then Frank started getting comfortable. It began with little comments on Dad's posts. If Dad shared a photo of a fishing trip, Frank would respond with tips about better fishing spots. If Dad mentioned a movie he'd watched, Frank would recommend similar films. Harmless enough, but something about his tone felt off. Then came the corrections. Dad would share an article about local politics, and Frank would reply with fact checks or alternative sources. Dad would mention a restaurant he'd tried, and Frank would suggest better options nearby. Every interaction felt like Frank was trying to one-up him. Dad started responding less frequently to the group chat. When he did participate, his messages were shorter, more formal. I could tell he was getting annoyed, but he was trying to keep the peace for my sake. The breaking point came 3 months ago during a discussion about Thanksgiving plans. Dad sent a message saying he was planning to cook this year and invited everyone over. He was excited about trying a new turkey recipe he'd found online, mentioned he'd already bought a special brine kit. Frank's response was immediate. "Actually, Jim, that brining method is outdated. Most professional chefs recommend dry aging now. I've got a technique that produces much better results. Happy to take over the cooking this year." Dad replied that he was looking forward to trying the new method, that he'd already started the prep work. Frank sent back a long paragraph about food safety concerns with amateur brining, complete with links to articles about proper temperature control and contamination risks. He ended with, "I just think it's better to leave complex cooking to people with experience. No offense." I watched this exchange happening in real time, cringing at my phone screen. Frank had essentially called my dad incompetent at cooking in front of the whole family. Dad's response was simple. "Thanks for the concern, I've got it handled." But Frank wasn't done. He sent another message suggesting Dad should at least let him supervise, that he'd hate for anyone to get sick from improperly prepared food. Then he added, "I know how important this is to you, Jim. I just want to make sure it goes well." That condescending tone was the last straw for Dad. He sent one final message. "Frank, I've been cooking Thanksgiving dinner longer than you've known this family. I think I can manage." The group chat went silent for 2 days. When the conversation resumed, it was just Mum trying to smooth things over, suggesting maybe we could all contribute dishes and make it a potluck-style dinner. Dad didn't respond at all. That's when I realised Frank had been systematically undermining my dad for months, disguising his put-downs as helpful suggestions and expert advice. And my mum either didn't notice or didn't want to see it. I decided to call Dad privately to check in. He was hurt, frustrated, and honestly questioning whether he wanted to stay in the group chat at all. "I feel like everything I say gets corrected or improved upon," Dad told me. "I can't share anything without Frank having a better way to do it. I don't need a lecture every time I mention what I had for lunch." I asked Dad if he wanted me to talk to Mum about Frank's behaviour. He said no, that he didn't want to cause problems in her marriage, but that he was getting tired of being treated like an incompetent child by his ex-wife's husband. The Thanksgiving dinner happened at Dad's house as planned. Frank and Mum came, but the atmosphere was tense. Frank made several comments throughout the meal about how surprised he was that everything turned out so well, how the turkey was actually quite good despite his concerns about the preparation method. Dad was polite but cold. I could see him mentally checking out of every conversation Frank tried to start. After dinner, Frank cornered me in the kitchen while we were cleaning up. He said he was concerned about Dad, that he seemed defensive and unwilling to accept help or advice. "I'm just trying to be supportive," Frank said. "I have a lot of experience with these things, and I hate to see him struggle when I could help." I looked at Frank and realised he genuinely didn't understand what he was doing. In his mind, he was being helpful, sharing his expertise, looking out for the family. He couldn't see how his constant corrections and suggestions were coming across as condescending and disrespectful. But intent doesn't erase impact. Dad felt belittled and dismissed, regardless of what Frank meant to accomplish. I decided to address it directly with Mum the next week. I explained how Frank's behaviour in the group chat was affecting Dad, how the constant corrections and suggestions were making him feel unwelcome in his own family's communication. Mum got defensive immediately. She said Frank was just trying to be helpful, that he had good intentions, that Dad was being overly sensitive. She accused me of taking sides and stirring up drama where none existed. "Frank cares about this family," Mum said. "He's trying to contribute and be involved. I don't understand why your father has to take everything as a personal attack. I tried to explain that it wasn't about Frank's intentions, but about the impact his words were having. That Dad felt like he couldn't participate in family conversations without being corrected or second-guessed. Mom said she'd talked to Frank about toning it down, but she also thought Dad needed to be more open to input from other family members. The conversation with Frank apparently didn't go well. According to Mom, Frank felt hurt and confused about being accused of undermining Dad. He said he'd just been trying to be part of the family, to contribute his knowledge and experience. The group chat limped along for another month with stilted, overly polite exchanges. Dad barely participated. Frank seemed to be trying to tone down his responses, but you could tell he was holding back comments he wanted to make. Then came the incident that ended everything. Dad shared a photo of a bookshelf he'd built in his den. He was proud of it. He'd designed it himself, measured everything carefully, spent weeks working on it in his garage. It looked great, and he was excited to show it off. Frank's response came an hour later. "Nice work, though I noticed the spacing between shelves isn't quite even. Probably should have used a jig for consistency. Also, looks like the wood could use another coat of stain, but not bad for a first attempt." Dad immediately left the group chat, just disappeared from the conversation entirely. I called him that night, and he was done, completely done. "I shared something I was proud of," Dad said, "something I'd worked hard on and felt good about. And the first response I get is a list of everything wrong with it. I'm not doing this anymore." Dad blocked Frank on social media and asked me not to share his contact information with him. He said he was happy to maintain a relationship with Mom, but it would have to be separate from Frank. Mum was devastated. She said Frank was heartbroken, that he'd never meant to hurt anyone, that the whole situation was being blown out of proportion. But Dad was firm. He said he was too old to spend his time walking on eggshells around someone who couldn't resist pointing out his flaws and shortcomings. It's been 2 months since Dad left the group chat, and the family dynamic has completely shifted. Mum and I text separately now. Dad and I have our own conversations. Frank sends me occasional messages trying to understand what went wrong, asking if there's anything he can do to fix things. I feel terrible for everyone involved. Frank really doesn't seem to understand how his behaviour came across. Mum is caught between her husband and her ex-husband, trying to maintain relationships with both. Dad is hurt and frustrated, but also relieved to be out of a situation that was making him miserable. The thing is, Frank isn't a bad person. He's knowledgeable, he does want to help, and I think he genuinely cares about the family. But he has this need to be the expert in every conversation, to improve upon everything anyone else shares. He can't just let people have their moments without adding his commentary. And Dad isn't wrong to be tired of it. Nobody wants to feel like they're constantly being graded on their life choices by someone who married into the family 5 years ago. I don't know if this rift will ever heal. Frank would need to fundamentally change how he interacts with people. And that's not easy for someone who doesn't fully understand what they're doing wrong. Dad would need to be willing to give him another chance, and right now, that seems unlikely. What started as a simple family group chat to stay connected ended up revealing incompatible communication styles that nobody knew how to navigate. Sometimes trying to bring people together just highlights all the ways they don't fit, and that's the end of that mess. The sad thing is, Frank probably thought he was being the helpful stepdad, sharing his wisdom and expertise with the family. But there's a difference between being helpful and being a know-it-all who can't let anyone else shine for 5 minutes. Dad was absolutely right to protect his peace, even if it meant blowing up the family dynamic. Some people really need to learn when to keep their corrections to themselves. Now let's move into our next story, which deals with an entirely different kind of family boundary issue. I'm 33 years old, and I've been married to my wife Jessica for 7 years. We have 2 kids, ages 5 and 3, and up until recently, I thought we had a pretty solid co-parenting system worked out. Jessica stays home with the kids, I work full-time as a software engineer, and we split the evening and weekend responsibilities pretty evenly. The issue started about 4 months ago when Jessica began what she calls her wellness journey. It began innocently enough with her joining a yoga studio and buying organic groceries. I was supportive because she'd been feeling stressed and overwhelmed with the kids, and if yoga and healthier eating helped her feel better, I was all for it. But then the wellness journey expanded. Jessica started following various Instagram influencers who promoted natural living and alternative health practices. She began buying expensive supplements, essential oils, and organic everything. Our grocery bill doubled seemingly overnight. I expressed some concern about the spending, but Jessica assured me these were investments in our family's health. She said she was learning so much about toxins in everyday products and how we could protect our children by making better choices. Then she started making changes to the kids' routines without discussing it with me first. I came home from work one day to find Jessica had thrown away all of our kids' regular shampoo, soap, and toothpaste. She'd replaced everything with expensive organic alternatives that cost 3 times as much. When I asked her about it, she explained that she'd learned about the harmful chemicals in conventional personal care products. She showed me articles and Instagram posts about parabens and sulfates and how they could disrupt hormones and cause developmental issues. I said I appreciated her research, but I wished she'd talked to me before making such a big change and expense. Jessica got defensive and said she was just trying to protect our children, that she couldn't believe I'd rather save money than keep our kids safe. That became the pattern. Jessica would learn about some new health concern from her online communities and immediately implement changes to our household without any discussion. Regular laundry detergent was replaced with an organic version that cost 4 times as much. She threw away our cleaning supplies and bought expensive, all-natural alternatives. The kids' diets changed dramatically. No more regular snacks or treats. Everything had to be organic, non-GMO, and free from artificial ingredients. Their lunch boxes went from normal kid food to elaborate arrangements of organic fruits, vegetables, and specialty items that cost a fortune. Our 5-year-old started complaining that her lunch was weird compared to her classmates. She asked why she couldn't have the same crackers and fruit snacks as everyone else. Jessica told her that other parents didn't care about their children's health as much as we did. That comment bothered me, but when I brought it up with Jessica, she said she was just trying to teach our daughter to make healthy choices. She didn't understand why I had a problem with that. The breaking point came when Jessica decided to take the kids off their regular vitamins and give them a special supplement regimen she'd learned about online. She bought hundreds of dollars worth of specialty vitamins, probiotics, and herbal supplements. She created a complex daily routine where the kids had to take multiple pills and liquid supplements at specific times. Our 3-year-old hated the taste of most of the supplements and would cry every morning when Jessica tried to give them to him. Our 5-year-old complained that her stomach hurt after taking all the pills. When I suggested maybe we should check with their pediatrician before giving them so many supplements, Jessica got angry. She said doctors were part of the problem, that they were trained to push pharmaceuticals instead of addressing root causes with natural solutions. I was shocked. Jessica had never expressed anti-medical sentiments before. She'd always been reasonable about healthcare decisions, but now she was questioning everything from our pediatrician's advice to the kids' vaccination schedule. She joined online groups that reinforced these beliefs and provided her with articles and testimonials that supported her new worldview. I tried to have rational conversations with her about balancing natural approaches with conventional medicine, but Jessica saw any pushback as me not caring about our children's well-being. The final straw came when our 3-year-old developed an ear infection. Instead of taking him to the doctor, Jessica wanted to treat it with essential oils and herbal remedies she'd learned about online. I insisted we see the pediatrician. Our son was in pain, running a fever, and clearly needed medical attention. Jessica reluctantly agreed, but spent the entire appointment questioning the doctor's recommendations and asking about natural alternatives. When the doctor prescribed antibiotics, Jessica refused to fill the prescription. She said she wanted to try natural treatments first, that antibiotics would damage our son's gut microbiome and weaken his immune system. I was furious. Our child was suffering, and Jessica was prioritizing her wellness ideology over his immediate health needs. That night, while Jessica was at her yoga class, I took our son to urgent care and filled the antibiotic prescription. Within 24 hours, his fever broke, and he was feeling much better. When Jessica found out what I'd done, she was livid. She accused me of going behind her back, of not respecting her role as the primary caregiver, of not caring about the long-term consequences of pumping our child full of chemicals. I told her I cared more about our son's immediate health than her internet research. That seemed to be the wrong thing to say. Jessica said I was being dismissive of everything she'd learned, that I wasn't taking her concerns seriously, that she felt like she was fighting for our children's health all alone. We've been in this standoff for weeks now. Jessica continues to follow her strict wellness protocols for herself and tries to impose them on the kids when I'm not around. I've started keeping regular food and products hidden in my office so the kids can have normal snacks and basic necessities. Our kids are caught in the middle. They don't understand why mommy and daddy disagree about what they can eat or what vitamins they have to take. Our 5-year-old has started asking if she's sick because mommy gives her so much medicine. Jessica has suggested we see a naturopathic doctor who can help us find a middle ground. I've suggested we see a marriage counsellor who can help us communicate better about parenting decisions. Neither of us has budged. I love my wife, but I feel like she's been taken in by a community that profits from fear-mongering about everyday products and medical care. She's spending thousands of dollars on supplements and specialty items while questioning proven medical treatments. But Jessica sees me as someone who doesn't care about our family's health, who's willing to expose our children to toxins and chemicals because I'm too lazy or cheap to make better choices. We're at an impasse, and I don't know how to bridge this gap without one of us completely abandoning our position. The scary part is that Jessica's convictions are getting stronger, not weaker. The online communities she's part of reinforce her beliefs and provide explanations for any pushback she encounters. They tell her that resistance from family members is normal, that people who haven't awakened to these truths will try to hold her back. I'm worried about what happens next. Will Jessica start refusing medical care for the kids entirely? Will she pull them out of school because she doesn't trust the environment? Will our marriage survive this fundamental disagreement about how to raise our children? I never thought I'd be in a position where I'd have to choose between supporting my wife and protecting my kids from her well-intentioned but potentially harmful decisions. Right now, I'm doing both, and it's exhausting. That story hits different, because you can see how genuine concern for family health spiraled into something potentially dangerous. Jessica's heart was in the right place, but she got sucked into online communities that prey on parental anxiety and turn normal people into medical conspiracy theorists. The husband was absolutely right to prioritize his son's immediate health over his wife's Instagram-informed treatment plans. Sometimes loving someone means protecting your kids from their misguided attempts to protect the kids. Let's move to our final story of the day, which takes us into workplace drama territory. I'm 25 years old, and until last month, I thought I had landed my dream job. I work as a graphic designer for a small marketing agency that specializes in local businesses. The pay was decent, the work was creative, and my boss seemed laid back and supportive during the interview process. The agency has 6 employees total: the owner Marcus, 2 account managers, another designer, an intern, and me. It's the kind of place where everyone wears multiple hats, and the atmosphere is supposed to be collaborative and casual. For the first few months, everything seemed great. Marcus gave me interesting projects, praised my work, and made me feel like a valued part of the team. I was designing logos, creating social media content, working on website layouts, exactly the kind of diverse portfolio building work I'd hoped for. The problem started when Marcus began asking me to stay late to work on rush projects. At first it seemed reasonable. Client emergencies happen, deadlines get moved up, and I was the newest team member trying to prove myself. When Marcus asked if I could stay an extra hour or two to finish something urgent, I said yes without hesitation. But the late nights became more frequent and longer. What started as occasionally staying until 7 became regularly staying until 9 or 10. Marcus would appear at my desk around 5:30 with a new urgent project that absolutely had to be finished before morning. The other employees seemed to leave right at 5, but Marcus made it clear that as the junior designer, I was expected to handle the overflow work that came in at the end of the day. I didn't want to seem unwilling or difficult, so I kept saying yes. I figured this was part of paying my dues in a competitive industry. Then Marcus started assigning me work that had nothing to do with graphic design. He asked me to reorganize the supply closet because I had such a good eye for organization. He had me research and book his personal travel arrangements because I was so good with logistics. He asked me to pick up his dry cleaning during my lunch break because the cleaners was right near that sandwich place you like. Wah! When I hesitated about the dry cleaning, Marcus said he was swamped with client work and really needed the help. He framed it as everyone pitching in to keep the agency running smoothly. But I noticed that the other employees were never asked to do Marcus's personal errands, just me. The breaking point came when Marcus asked me to dog sit his golden retriever over a long weekend while he went out of town. He didn't ask, he assumed. He mentioned casually on a Friday that he'd drop off Cooper's food and toys at my apartment Sunday morning, and that Cooper was a good dog who wouldn't be any trouble. I was so caught off guard that I didn't know how to respond. By the time I processed what had happened, Marcus was already walking away, saying he'd text me his address for the key pickup. I spent the weekend dog-sitting for my boss, walking Cooper 3 times a day, and wondering how my job had turned into unpaid personal assistant work. When Marcus returned, he thanked me briefly and handed me a $20 bill, like I was a teenager who'd done him a small favor. That's when I realized I needed to set some boundaries. The next time Marcus asked me to stay late for a non-urgent project, I politely declined. I explained that I had personal commitments and suggested we prioritize the work during regular business hours. Marcus seemed surprised but said he understood. However, over the next few days, I noticed a shift in his attitude toward me. He stopped including me in creative brainstorming sessions. He gave the more interesting projects to the other designer and assigned me repetitive, basic tasks. When clients complimented my work, Marcus would redirect the credit to the team as a whole, rather than acknowledging my specific contribution. The passive-aggressive treatment continued for weeks. Marcus would make comments about team players and going above and beyond. He'd mention how much he valued employees who were willing to do whatever it takes to help the agency succeed. It felt like I was being punished for establishing normal work boundaries. The situation escalated when we landed a big client that required a major rebranding project. It was exactly the kind of high-profile work I'd hoped to be involved with when I took the job. Marcus assigned the project to the other designer, even though I had more experience with brand identity work. When I asked about it, he said he needed to give it to someone he could count on to be flexible with their time and availability. The message was clear. If I wanted good assignments, I needed to go back to being available for whatever Marcus needed, whenever he needed it. I decided to document everything. I started keeping track of the extra hours I worked, the personal tasks I was asked to do, and the way project assignments seemed to correlate with my willingness to do unpaid overtime. I also started researching labor laws. Turns out that asking an employee to do personal errands isn't illegal, but there are rules about overtime pay and job duties that don't match your official role. I realized I'd been working an average of 55 hours per week, but only getting paid for 40. All those late nights and weekend tasks added up to hundreds of hours of unpaid overtime. I decided to address it directly with Marcus. I requested a meeting and presented my documentation of the extra hours and tasks. I explained that I loved the design work, but felt like my role had expanded beyond what was discussed when I was hired. Marcus got defensive immediately. He said that in a small agency, everyone has to wear multiple hats and be willing to go above and beyond. He suggested that maybe I wasn't a good fit for the collaborative culture they'd built. I asked about compensation for the overtime hours I'd been working. Marcus said that as a salaried employee, I was expected to work whatever hours were necessary to get the job done. But I wasn't actually salaried, I was hourly, which meant I should have been getting overtime pay for anything over 40 hours per week. When I pointed this out, Marcus said we'd have to look into it, but his tone suggested he had no intention of paying me for past overtime. That's when I decided to file a complaint with the Department of Labour. I gathered all my documentation, timesheets, text messages asking me to do personal tasks, emails about last-minute projects, and submitted a formal complaint about unpaid overtime. The investigation took 3 weeks. During that time, Marcus's behaviour toward me became openly hostile. He criticised my work constantly, excluded me from team meetings, and made comments about employees who couldn't be trusted. When the Labour Department investigator contacted the agency, Marcus called me into his office and accused me of trying to destroy the business. He said I was being vindictive and ungrateful after everything he'd done for me. I reminded him that everything I'd documented was factual. The hours I'd worked, the tasks I'd been assigned, the pay I'd received. If that looked bad, maybe the problem wasn't with my documentation. The investigation concluded that the agency owed me over $4,000 in unpaid overtime. They also found that asking me to do personal errands during work hours violated several labour regulations. Marcus was furious. He paid the back wages as required, but made it clear that my future at the agency was limited. I started job hunting immediately. 2 weeks later, I gave my notice. Marcus accepted it without trying to convince me to stay, which told me everything I needed to know about how he viewed my contribution to the team. My last day was awkward. The other employees seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. Some of them thanked me privately for standing up for workers' rights, but nobody said anything publicly. Marcus gave me a lukewarm reference letter and wished me luck in my future endeavours. The subtext was clear. He was glad to see me go. I found a new job within a month at a larger agency with clear policies about overtime, job duties, and work-life balance. The pay is better, the projects are more challenging, and nobody has asked me to pick up their dry cleaning. Looking back, I realise I should have set boundaries much earlier. I let Marcus take advantage of my eagerness to prove myself, and by the time I spoke up, the relationship was already damaged. But I don't regret filing the complaint. Marcus was breaking labour laws and taking advantage of a young employee who didn't know better. If I hadn't stood up for myself, he would have kept exploiting whoever came after me. I heard through industry contacts that Marcus had to implement new policies about overtime and job duties after my complaint. Apparently, the Labour Department investigation made him realise how many regulations he'd been violating with other employees too. Part of me feels bad about how it ended. I genuinely liked the creative work and wanted to build a career there. But I learned that no job is worth sacrificing your dignity or legal rights, no matter how much you want to succeed. The experience taught me to recognise the difference between paying your dues and being exploited. There's nothing wrong with working hard and going above and beyond occasionally, but when your boss starts treating you like a personal assistant instead of a professional, it's time to push back. I'm in a much better place now, working for people who respect boundaries and understand that good employees deserve fair treatment. Sometimes standing up for yourself means burning bridges, but some bridges aren't worth preserving. And that's the end of that workplace nightmare. Marcus really thought he could turn his graphic designer into a personal servant and then act shocked when she had the audacity to expect fair pay for her work. The entitlement of small business owners who think labour laws don't apply to them never ceases to amaze me. At least she got her back pay and found a better job. Sometimes the best revenge is just moving on to something better. That wraps up another deep dive into the wild world of human drama and questionable decision-making. If you're still here after all these stories of family feuds, wellness cult rabbit holes, and workplace exploitation, you're definitely cut out for the long haul of internet storytelling. These kinds of messy, complicated situations happen every day, and somehow people keep sharing them online for our entertainment and moral judgment. Hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed this journey through relationship chaos and family dysfunction, because there's always more where this came from, and I love having you along for the ride through the beautiful disaster that is human nature.